Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce. This is a Ukraine war news update. The first part there for the 28th of August 2025. I should get that date right. The reason I'm late in doing this video is it's my twin's birthday today, so I had to do like family stuff. My folks came round and whatnot, which is obviously lovely. Although today is a huge day of news concerning the strikes last night, one of the most significant, I think, for some time. And we'll talk about that when we get to the strikes section. But just to foreshadow that Russia massively attacked, particularly Kyiv. And Ukraine actually had some really significant attacks on Russia, many of which we're unaware of at the moment still. I'm fairly sure Crimea took an absolute tonking, but we don't have any information on that at the moment. Anyway, more of that later. Let's start with the Ukrainian General Staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply, of course. 880 personnel lost is about where it's been. 4 tanks and 7 troop-carrying AFVs, still below the daily average, although slightly higher maybe for a couple of those categories, and I think we saw yesterday 40 artillery systems. So this is typical. We see low combat asset losses as the Russians are using trucks and motorbikes and quads, and high artillery systems losses well above the daily average there, suggesting that the Ukrainians are really explicitly going for those artillery pieces. 2 multiple launch rocket systems. We've seen an MLRS very deep, sort of 50 kilometers behind enemy lines, getting taken out. We're going to talk about that in a second. One that was set on fire by an FPV drone that hit it in Kherson Oblast near the coast. 120 vehicles and fuel tanks, so high in that category, signifying probably that Russia is still attacking using those vehicles, but also that Ukraine is probably hitting logistics hard with drones, as the Russians are doing to the Ukrainians too. And then 2 pieces of special equipment worth looking at. Drones, 325. That'll be half of last night and half of the night before. The night before was a low number of drones. Last night was a massive number of drones. So you can see there that half of that will be recorded on today's figures, and then half of last night's drone attack will be recorded on tomorrow's figures, and you'll probably get some missiles on there as well. Okay, we'll go to some other sources to look at those kind of loss stats and put them in context. The Wall Street Journal is reporting that drones are accounting or have accounted for around 70 to 80% of casualties in Ukraine. I don't know what the time frame for that is, because obviously that changes and has changed throughout the war. But right now, I'd suggest that's probably correct. 70 to 80% of casualties are from drones. It used to be 80% artillery. That has changed. It used to be, what were the numbers? Was it something like 88% of casualties were artillery right at the beginning of the war? 8% snipers. So snipers were incredibly important. And then the rest kind of small arms, and then you have the odd missiles and whatnot. That's completely changed. Drones now are the god of war in this present era of modern warfare, I think. Right, looking at Andrew Perpetual's loss list. This is for the 26th, so it's not yesterday, but the day before. He's just catching up a little bit. So 2 days ago, we had Russian losses looking like that. A few pieces of artillery, a few tanks and whatnot. Quite a few trucks. ATVs, obviously, we're going to see them on the list as we do every day. And then for the Ukrainians, we're going to discount the pinks there. Quite a lot of mobility vehicles and quite a few civilian vehicles as well. So this is typical for what we are seeing at the moment, which I think suggests that Ukrainians are counterattacking in a number of places. Okay, so we've got your normal comms equipment. The Russians like to, just to remind people, not everyone watches all the videos. So there are lots of pink entries, particularly on the Ukrainian losses, and it looks terrible for Ukraine every day. But actually, these surveillance and comms pieces of equipment are generally not super important. Like, yes, it's important they're losing this so regularly, but actually these aren't worth the same amount of money as, say, VAB armored personnel carrier, right? And sometimes, well, very often they're just pieces of kit that are like this big. But the Russians like to, for some reason, and Andrew has explained this, the Russians have this kind of, many of the units have this almost pro forma way of doing their videos, where they show this and they show that and they show some surveillance and comms equipment. So whenever you get a montage of Russian hits, they'll have loads of surveillance and comms equipment. The Ukrainians aren't bothered with that. So when they do their videos, they're like, yeah, whatever, that's not important. They won't put that and publish that. So that then looks like there's the Russians doing much better at destroying surveillance and comms equipment than the Ukrainians. It's a selection bias going on there, where the Ukrainians aren't bothered to shout about them, but for some reason the Russians think it's really important, so they do. So that at least goes some way to explaining why there is this preponderance of the surveillance and comms entries on Andrew's list. He has people that look at his list that are very interested in that kind of equipment, so he includes it as well. We've got a Go 12 radar. I'm not sure how big that is. And then we're down to, in fact, should we have a little look at that? Go 12 radar. So that's going to be a tripod, so a smaller kind of radar system there. So it's not hugely problematic to lose something like that compared to, say, a Nebo radar array or something. We've got your typical bunch of UGVs on there, a couple of excavators, some artillery, 2 tanks, both T-64s, 1 abandoned, 1 damaged, a single IFV destroyed, BMP-2, bunch of APCs, looks like 8 of them. Your M113s taking up most of the list. We've got an F103 Spartan, so a UK provided one, Snatch Land Rover, both of those damaged. Then we've got about a dozen MRAPs, mine resistant ambush protection vehicles, a usual spread of Max Pros, QRPs, Bushmaster, Australian provided one there, Kozak, Senator from Canada. About half of them irretrievably lost. Some mobility vehicles, almost all Humvees. They have been provided a whole host of Humvees throughout the war. Obviously not a lot recently, but earlier on in the war, America did a great job of getting a shed load of those to Ukraine. 8 of those taken out, well, 5 of them damaged, the rest of them, other 3 irretrievably lost. A couple of trucks, some ATVs, some quads and buggies, and then a whole load of civilian vehicles, showing that the Russians are doing a good job of taking out roads full of, or roads, logistics routes and whatnot, as the Ukrainians are doing to the Russians too. So they're both, big on that. The Russians, some surveillance and comms equipment, equally some engineering vehicles. Andrew includes Zemledelia on there. That's a mine laying vehicle, so it throws out all these mines. I showed you the video of that getting taken out the other day. That I think is much more significant than, say, an excavator. So that's a kind of piece of special equipment, and that causes a lot of problems for the Ukrainians, obviously laying all those mines. Then we've got some artillery pieces, quite a few D30s and whatnots, and unlabeled howitzers, a Grad P and a Grom. So yeah, some different pieces of artillery there on the list today. A couple of track garden sheds out the 5 being lost today, which shows you that the Russians are using tanks to a significant degree in ways that they weren't designed to be used, basically as glorified APCs and not as tanks. That's when they add all the metal to them and whatnot. APCs, got 3 of them on the list then. A whole bunch of trucks today. There's a lot more trucks than we normally see. Back to the early days of seeing huge numbers of trucks and then kind of realize the Russians running low on trucks, but they seem to have more trucks being lost at the moment than and when I say at the moment, the last sort of month or so, than we were seeing previously. So I don't know what's going on there. And half of those irretrievably lost. An awful lot of motorcycles and quads there. A couple of mopeds thrown in that the Russians are using. And then civilian vehicles. Not as many civilian vehicles as the Ukrainians, but a lot more ATVs and a lot more trucks than the Ukrainians. So there you go. 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, really, for both sides. Now, I was talking about the... I'm just being shown the cake that my missus has just baked for the boys through the window. Lovely. A lot of chocolate. So I was talking about the, you don't need to know anything about that. Talking about that 50-kilometer hit on a multiple launch rocket system. That's a long way behind the lines here. We've got the Eleshki Sands, you've got Kherson, and you've got Dnipro River, and we're going right back down to sort of Skadovsk area, maybe... trying to look on the map where that might be, but anyway, yeah, quite a long way from that front line, or where the river is. So what's going on there? Well, Trent Telenko says FPV drones are recorded at 50 kilometers max. That's this is a lot more. So previously at 50 kilometers, he's saying this is a lot more than 50 kilometers. This is either a local partisan operating the FPV, or the FPV is operating from a fixed wing drone tender, or it could well be from a USV, an unmanned surface vehicle, driving along the coast like we've seen previously, right? So acting as a repeater. But we are also understanding that both sides are using fixed wing drones. We've seen an Orlan 10, I think it's Orlan 10 or Orlan 30, one of the Orlan drones being used as a mothership with 2 FPVs under its wings. So both sides are using these larger reconnaissance drones, acting as carriers and then repeaters for FPV drones. So then your range is massively extended. So Trent Telenko says this is hard evidence that crewed jet strike fighters have drone competition for a deep battlefield interdiction role. A really interesting point here is that that's the sort of strike that you would expect a plane to be able to do. That's part of the kind of function of your jets doing deep strikes with a very expensive missile. Well, now we've got a relatively cheap reconnaissance drone. Let's say we've got a relatively cheap fixed wing reconnaissance drone getting behind the enemy lines, dropping off some FPV drones, and FPV drones now, you know, maybe stacked up with an optimal amount of explosives and destroying bits of kit. So although it might not have the kinetic and explosive power of a missile with a warhead that a plane can fire at, I mean, you do have some functionality of a jet, right? And what it can do. And this was the multiple launch rocket system that was hit and then caught fire, and that was the end of that. So I don't think I showed you that yesterday, but I referenced this video yesterday, and you can see it hit there. I think it hit, and I was quite interested in this hit because actually quite a lot of fire started there straight away, and I wondered what was in that drone, because if you look at that, there is of course that was going to happen, of course. I think this is more significant than you might think. Like, you know, these small details are often important. So you've got a small FPV. First of all, it was noted that the reconnaissance drone was looking at this. So this is a long way behind the line. So this wasn't a USV. This was dropped from a reconnaissance drone. Of course, I remember now, because it's looking at the FPV strike. So a reconnaissance drone catches a multiple launch rocket system parked on the side of a road, sends off the FPV drone. FPV drone goes and hits it. And then look at this explosion. So the explosion, that's pretty normal. But it looks like it instantly starts off a fire in a way that it looks like that fire is coming from the drone. Now, that looks like there's fuel, or do you know what I mean? The fire is down the side and along the top in quite a significant manner, to the point that that's not setting fire to stuff. That's just metal bits. Okay, you've got rockets and stuff there, but that would have explosions. I'm wondering whether the drone was loaded with, you know, petrol or something, as well as an explosive, so that it can do extra damage. I don't know. Let me know what you think. But the way that caught fire, I think, was somewhat different than what we've seen before. Right, then we're going to go to a bit of footage that's come out today. So warriors of Ukrainian Defense Intelligence struck a small Russian missile ship of the Project 21631, a Buyan M, but it does carry Caliber cruise missiles, and this was hit in the Sea of Azov. So the Sea of Azov is south of Berdyansk and Mariupol, and northeast of Crimea. So again, like, how's this getting hit in the Sea of Azov? Like, not many people have talked about where this was supposedly. They're talking about, you know, it being hit as a significant vessel, but not many people talking about the location. I find the location fascinating. So you've got a drone that slams into the radar tower here, and then it looks like a second drone, but we don't see the explosion of the first drone. So, like, what's going on here? Anyway, possibly hit by 2 drones, and that seemed to then hit the superstructure on the ship there, on the vessel. So the Project 21631 Buyan M corvette is a compact but heavily armed Russian missile ship. Its main weapon is a Caliber NK missile system capable of firing 3 M14 land attack missiles, 3 M55 Onyx anti-ship missiles, and reportedly future 3 M22 Zircon hypersonic missiles. So the Zircon is this missile that has been used a number of times throughout the war. So this is a significant hit. I'd love to know the damage done to this ship. War Vehicle Tracker, who's one of these people who's brutally honest, even when Ukraine, has a bad day, he will tell you about it. This is so pathetic, he says. Is the CIWS sleeping? And no way the radar did not detect it. So he's saying, basically saying, what is going on here? How can a ship like that have a drone approach it, or maybe 2 drones approach it and do that? Arguably, no one performed worse in this war than the Black Sea Fleet, he says, did not manage to achieve a single objective, showed the true face of their ships, and lost a lot of them to anything but ships. So a absolutely stinging rebuke there. I mean, sorry, but lobbing calibers from time to time at Ukraine, and then that just being, and other than that, just being scared to ship out because your defense against USVs, unmanned surface vehicles, are Lancets and helicopters, which can't be there always, is pathetic. And practically not having any defense against aerial drones is worse. Even funnier, they do have defense, it just doesn't seem to ever flipping work. Like, I have yet to see those rusty AK-630 CIWS to ever work, unlike American CIWS, which has proven itself well against drones and other things. So I think those are the kind of fire as much lead into the air really quickly, to kind of take out almost fragmentation, take out anything that's attacking you. Also, where are the onboard man pads if you need the man portable air defense system? So the American Stingers or whatever. Really good points, I think, there from War Vehicle Tracker. Now, on the other hand, we're just hearing that Russian Ministry of Defense, pinch of salt and all that, have announced that the Ukrainian Navy's medium-sized reconnaissance ship, Simferopol, was hit by a fast unmanned boat at the mouth of the Danube River. So this is close to Odessa. If it's true, they've got a USV all the way over to Odessa and hit area, and actually further south than there, and it hit a ship, a Ukrainian reconnaissance ship in the mouth of the Danube. As a result of the attack, the Ukrainian ship sank. Now, as someone says, footage, or it never happened. Isn't it interesting that Ukrainians showed this footage, and then like a couple of hours later, the Russians claim that they've sunk a Ukrainian ship? So it does seem very coincidental. However, it could well have happened. So just, we'll have to wait and see if that is true or not. Oryx project has detected the first visually confirmed loss of a Russian D-74 gun. So this is a towed howitzer that was produced in the 1950s, like we've seen the M46, the D-20s, D-30s. It's been used by the Russians at least since autumn. A number of D-74 guns the Russians have remains unknown. It is believed that fewer of these guns were produced than any other types. This weapon remained predominantly export. It was actively supplied to Vietnam as well as to many other countries that received Soviet support. But one of those has been destroyed or damaged. So, it showed you what the Russians are using. Now, Russians, and this was reported the other day, and with someone driving past some destroyed vehicles. This is a highway, and these are civilian vehicles. You can see a civilian truck being hit. These are Russian drones, a montage of Russian drones hitting Ukrainian civilian vehicles. Like, the Russians are just complete bastards. There's absolutely no doubt about it. And this is the sort of stuff that should be on mainstream media outlets. Right? These are war crimes happening. So Andrew Perpetua saying Russians attacking civilians on the M14 highway to Kherson. They know everyone here is a civilian, but they take significant joy in murdering innocent people. After all, the genocide of the Ukrainian people is a primary goal, military goal of Russia. Everything else is secondary. There are people now saying, that's a car there. There are people now saying that Kherson as a city is the first time a city has been put under siege by drones. The Ukrainians need to do something about this, but they are struggling. And the Russians have now basically besieged a city with drones. Any discussion of peace negotiations will remain unproductive until there is a clear recognition that Russia's underlying objective is a systematic destruction of the Ukrainian nation. Sustainable peace can only be achieved by ensuring that Russia no longer has a capacity to commit acts of aggression or genocide against its neighbours. This is horrific. And you've seen the posts that would be used for drone nets. Obviously not fully operational there. Now, I presume this is again in the Kherson region, but on the other side of the river, on the occupied side. And again, we see probably in the forest there around the Uleshki Sands or something. You can tell by the ground and the kind of style of these forests. I suggest it's there. Not a day goes by, says Max 25, without the total burning of the Russians. IOAII property, I don't know what that stands for. Dugouts, weapons, etc. are reduced to ashes. So lots of footage of Ukrainian success in striking Russian bases, but you know, there is an ecological cost to this, unfortunately. It breaks my heart, actually. It's, you know, war is horrific, and the sooner this stops, the better. As long as it is stopping to you know, to a just end. I could have included this in the strikes section, but I've got too much stuff in there. So Jankoy was hit 2 nights ago, as I said. Actually 3 nights ago, was it? Anyway, multiple nights. Crimea is just under a lot of pressure at the moment from the Ukrainians. The aftermath of a strike on actually fuel and lubricants train, says Max 25 here. So not just logistics, as we heard about substations, but actual train, not infrastructure, but, you know, the rolling stock, if you like, there. And indeed, we hear that at night a Russian Railways locomotive was set on fire in Syktyvkar depot in the Komi Republic. This is a long way from Ukraine. Komi was where a drone got through, hit the side of a oil container, and then didn't explode the oil container, just burst a pipe that went around it. Partisans set fire to diesel locomotive TEP-70 number 455, breaking the glass and throwing a bottle of incendiary Bandera Shmuzi into the locomotive's cabin. This is good stuff. Partisan activity a long way from Ukraine, and that's going to hurt the Russians. Anything like that is good news. In fact, Atesh partisan group has said that agents successfully planned and carried out sabotage by destroying a relay box on the railway near Samara. So again, deep into Russia. This line is important since it carries cargo from military industrial complex enterprises. So again, showing Atesh there. This is deep inside Russia. Significant. I want to know what sort of people are doing this. I'm fascinated in this. Then we hear this. Now, I reported a car bomb going off the other day in Melitopol. Here, potentially a car bomb or some kind of sabotage activity in Moscow. I've not heard about this from anyone else, but Jay in Kiev is translating a Russian post that says, on the cotton of the children's world, definitely not a cotton, but a successful sabotage by the Hochos, so the Ukraine. So this is a Russian saying cotton is usually like a drone explosion. They blew up the one they wanted. The FSB general is in a serious condition in an artificial coma. The issue of amputation of the lower limbs is being decided, but the doctors do not want to cut yet because there is no point. The area of responsibility of the border guard general, specifically the Belgorod region, the decision was made to keep quiet about because the FSB slept through the sabotage against themselves, and so no one doubts that in the thoroughfare into which the wise former special services officer had turned Russia, anyone can be got, hence that translation makes very little sense to me, but you get the point that it appears a Russian sabotage incident has taken place whereby an FSB general has been hit and is close to death. So again, how did that happen? Where did it happen exactly? As in, we know Moscow there, but you know, what the details? I've not seen anything else on that. Right, let's move to some almost record-breaking strikes on Ukraine last night and what Ukraine have done to Russia. So the Ukrainian Air Force reported that today Ukraine came under attack from 598 drones and 31 missiles. A total of 589 enemy targets were shot down or suppressed. What an incredible success rate, first of all. So this was an insane number of munitions. But to have 589 targets out of actually 629 being shot down, that's a really good success rate. 31 missiles were sent, 1 Kinzhal was shot down, 7 Iskander-M, so ballistic missiles being shot down, 18 cruise missiles. So that's 26 there, missiles out of 31. That's an incredible success. 563 out of 589 drones taken out, 598 drones, being taken out. That's an incredible success rate. So the Ukrainians have got to be happy with how they've operated there. You generally see these kind of good interception rates when Russia is aiming at Kiev, Lviv, these main places that have the best air defenses. I mean, that's the dilemma for the Russians. Do they just send all of those drones against frontline places and most of the drones get through, but then they never hit really key facilities like the ones you might find around Kiev? Or do they throw a lot of drones and missiles against Kiev and hope that some get through and hit these main facilities, but actually they generally won't be successful? Although they will be somewhat successful, but they also seem to be aiming for civilian infrastructure as well, as we will see. So what took place then? Okay, Kiev was attacked with jet-powered Garand 3 drones. So considering most drones are shot down, that's good. These are drones that are harder to shoot down. They fly faster. And their terminal phase will be more difficult. So the UAVs were found to contain a Czech PBS TJ40G2 engine from PBS Velká Bytes. So it's a Czech company providing the motors to the engines to these drones, and a German Bosch fuel pump typically used in cars. So these are the type of drones, these jet drones, that are being used more frequently by the Russians. That is a worry for the Ukrainians. Now, we look at, there's a couple of maps showing you slightly different interpretations of what took place last night. But on the night, the Russians carried out a combined strike on Kiev's residential areas using Shaheds, Garands, ballistic missiles and cruise missiles and Kinzhals. You can see that Kiev was targeted big time, but some also did go to the west. So I don't know if that's Lutsk up there, but certainly Ivano-Frankivsk and Ternopil possibly could have been on the agenda for the Russians. Indeed, we look at another map here. We see, forget the numbers of people because that's vastly changed since this map came out. Fire swept through residential high-rises, homes, a kindergarten, post office, university. In fact, that's a Novopochta sorting office. And offices, rescues and city services continue the clean-up amid the devastation. So again, Kiev really targeted. Then that looks like Khmelnytsky maybe. Staro Konstantinov, I don't know, maybe the airbase in Khmelnytsky was targeted. You've got Dnipro, and you've got what looks like Kramator, Sloviansk kind of area there as well. Yeah, but Kiev certainly one of the main sources, or the main targets, main destinations for these missiles and drones. So Russia carried out a combined strike on Ukraine last night, launching all of those different drones and missiles. 20 cruise missiles, 9 Iskander, but to take out 7 Iskander-Ms, that's an incredibly successful night. 2 Kinzhals, 1 was taken out. So the death toll is now, I think, at least 14, unfortunately, in Kiev. But we'll come to that in a second. This came out, this is not from last night, but actually from yesterday. CNN published an interesting infographic. These are drone attacks on Russia and Ukraine. So the Russian drone attacks are in sort of purple, Ukrainian drone attacks in yellow. Look at the number of drone attacks in Belgorod and Kursk and then Bryansk. So an awful lot around there. Krasnodar down here. What's that? That's going to be Rostov, and then you've got Volgograd. But yeah, interesting there that so many of the drones that the Russians send are very close to the front lines, and of course they have much greater levels of success when they do send those close to the front line. Now, we already knew last night that the Russians were sending ballistics because there was early evidence that the Ukrainians had successfully taken out a ballistic missile, the Patriot SAM system, that was caught on camera supposedly. So we know that they were at least somewhat successful, and the general staff saying actually 7 out of 9 of the Iskander-Ms. I mean, that's a really good ballistic missile interception rate. Putin says Anton Gerashchenko is deliberately striking Kiev on the eve of a meeting in the United States between the head of the office of the president of Ukraine. So Andriy Yermak is gone across with Rustem Umerov to meet the Americans. So I think there's some a symbolic nature to this strike. President Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff is going to meet with them. But caught on camera, these missile strikes into a couple of missiles that successfully hit Kiev, I say successfully, slamming into residential areas. For Putin, killing people is a method of blackmail and pressure. It is the language and actions of a terrorist, the world's most notorious terrorist and war criminal. Here we have War Translated showing us the moment of a direct hit where 2 Russian missiles struck a residential building in Kiev, as we just saw. So there you go, just a massive explosion there. That's a missile slamming into a building. Now, I presume that is the direct hit from a Russian missile, as he says here, a moment of a direct hit, rather than it being a missile sent off by electronic warfare or air defenses or something, which would suggest that they are either directly going for that residential building, or that's within the circle error probable, and they're going for another building, maybe administrative building. But this was, 50% of the time you're going to get it within the CEP of that target or whatever. You can interpret that in many different ways. But then the question is, what are you doing sending these not perfectly accurate missiles into the middle of a capital city to try and hit this thing, knowing that most often you're going to be hitting something else that looks like a civilian residential block, and then you're still arguably committing a war crime, even if you're trying to be as charitable as to the Russians as possible. The end result is, of course, that we look at Kherson and we look at Kiev and we look at anywhere else in Russia, and we can be safe in saying that the Russians are war criminals. They are just war criminals. So update, at least 14 is probably going to go up. I think there were 10 missing bodies, 14 killed in a Russian mass attack on Kiev, including children. So 38 people have been injured, actually more than that now, during the Russian attack on Kiev, the Interior Ministry said. 10 are considered missing. Well, actually, that's popped up to 14 and maybe even higher now. Among the dead are 3 children. Just horrific stuff, and there will be more and more images coming out throughout the day. As you can see, the entire top floor of that residential building has been taken out, as well as behind the destruction to the other buildings. Just horrific stuff. This is right in the middle of fairly central in Kiev, as far as I understand it. We got a video from Kaylin in a minute, Kaylin Robertson. So yeah, just really, really heartbreaking stuff to see these civilian areas, these apartment blocks being absolutely destroyed. These are people's lives, people's businesses, jobs, loved ones, pets, all sorts. Just, yeah. So Kaylin Robertson says the following.
So a Russian missile has just landed in the center of Kyiv, right in the downtown center. The buildings are still burning all around me here, and the rescue workers are still pulling people out of these buildings. And this is what the Russians have been doing constantly for the last 3.5 years. But this is just the devastation that it causes. People being pulled out of buildings, people who are woken up at 6 o'clock in the morning with their entire homes smashed to pieces. And this is right bang downtown in the center of Kyiv. There's no military targets here. These are people's homes, these are people's businesses, these are people's lives. And this is how people have to live in a major European city every single day. And this is what Russian terrorism looks like. Absolutely disgusting. So a Russian missile has just landed.
And he's absolutely right. That's what Russian terrorism looks like. I've reached out to Kaylin. So he's facilitated, not quite hosted, but he's organised a YouTuber, an influencer, a political influencer called Luke Beasley, who's a young lad who's a bit like Adam Mockler, sort of very prominent within the political landscape of the US, certainly on YouTube. And he's gone over to Ukraine, and he would have been in probably Kiev last night for this. So I watched Luke Beasley's video from him just arriving there and what he had to say, and it was really good. I almost actually shared it with all of you, saying, watch this. This is what we want. We want like political, preferably from both sides of the aisle, but any kind of political influencers on YouTube or any influencers being out and communicating what's going on in Ukraine. I think it's really, really important. So I reached out to Kaylin because I'd absolutely love to interview Luke Beasley about that. But nonetheless, he hasn't read my message. So Anton Gerashenko says, Russia lost its mind a long time ago. Today, Ukraine is the only country actively and directly fighting against Putin. Ukraine is successfully resisting and shielding Europe. Ukraine is fighting a monster. Russia planned to defeat Ukraine in 3 days, yet more than 3 years have passed. The vast Russian state unable to force Ukraine into voluntary capitulation resorts to terror at killing peaceful Ukrainians and children with missiles again and again. Today, European residential buildings are not being shelled, but that is only because Ukraine is still holding the line. Thanks to Ukraine, Russian troops are not advancing through Europe. The Russian missiles are not striking European cities. If Ukraine is strong and is not strong and loses this war, Europe will be the next to lose. This needs to be like, sometimes Russia make a rod for their own back in that, you know, at a time when Trump is starting to spout Russian propaganda again, and JD Vance is definitely spouting Russian propaganda. If they do hits like that, then this will get Trump going, oh, Melania's told me that they've struck Kiev again just when we're just about to have talks. This should annoy Trump, and I hope it will. I hope that the US come out with a really strong response to what happened last night. As I think, you know, Pierre told me this morning, and I've had this conversation with Pierre before, and I think I've said this to you before. And this sounds, what I'm going to say sounds really horrible, but understand it in a broader, maximal, you know, zoomed out view of Ukraine and geopolitics. Sometimes the most horrific strikes on Ukraine are the most useful for Ukraine in a really utilitarian way. When you have, and I remember saying what Ukraine needs to get the Republicans back on side, just back at the time when this was before the election and everything, and the Republicans seem to be going this partisan direction where they're rejecting support for Ukraine. What you need is something that's really horrific to happen in Ukraine that makes everyone really obviously realize who the bad guys are. And when that happens, you're like, oh yeah, Russia are the bad guys. Yeah, let's just, you know, recalibrate. And the Republicans go, yep, that is horrible. That we can't deny that was horrible. We're going to support Ukraine more. Do you know what I mean? So, like, he sent me a picture. I should probably show this to you. But it's a, you know, he says, as tragic as it is, last night was a big win for Ukraine on multiple levels. It puts more pressure on Trump, and Ukraine puts more pressure on Putin. This photo will help. And I'm actually going to try and show you this photo, because I think that's exactly right. I think your man is, as in Pierre, is exactly right. So let's put that photo up here for you. So there's a photo that, you know, you start showing something like that to Donald Trump. And then he realizes, yeah, okay, Russia, we're trying to do peace negotiations, and Russia are bombing the crap out of civilians. Now, Ukraine hit Russia last night massively with drones, but there's a big difference. You know, you're not going to see images like that coming out of Russia this morning. And so I completely agree with what Pierre said there. Now, we're hearing, I know more details on this, that a Bayraktar factory in Kiev was hit with 2 Russian strikes at night. So again, you know, don't think it's all on civilian infrastructure. The Russians will be going for the military industrial complex. They will have particular targets in mind. So yeah, that would be a real shame if that has been hit from a military point of view. But we also hear that Marta Kos, EU ambassador to Ukraine, says the EU delegation in Kiev was damaged. That's EU mission, not the delegation. Delegation usually means people, but actually it's the mission. The EU mission in Kiev was damaged by today's Russian strikes on civilian areas. Strong condemnations are already flowing in, surely enough to terrify Moscow. That would be the hope, that exactly that point is that this works in Ukraine's favor. When they get a big strike like this that is clearly at least war criminal in many cases, then people find it easier to condemn Russia, right? Russian strike hits the EU and UK diplomatic buildings in Kiev in a night attack. Belgium's foreign minister has confirmed damage to EU British Council buildings in Kiev, saying Russia chooses terror, destruction and lies instead of dialogue. And again, this is what needs to be shown to Donald Trump. That you know, this is infrastructure for peace, for trying to bring this war to a close, and Russia is trying to stop that. At the same time this morning, you know, fires were still burning to the point where helicopters were dropping their buckets into lakes. This is not without risk, by the way, doing this. A French helicopter the other day trying to fight forest fires, I think in France, went into the lake actually and crashed. Everyone survived, luckily, but there is a risk involved with this. In Kiev, Ukrainian helicopters scooped water from lakes to extinguish fires from Putin's bombing of the city last night. And then we have consequences of the Russian attack on central district of Kiev, and we can see how this damage has been really significant to some areas of central Kiev there. And the cleanup starts. The Ukrainians are incredible. They will be cleaning up, and this will be not exactly fixed, but it will be functional again. This area of the city, you'll be able to drive through the streets really relatively quickly. They do such a good job of cleaning up really quickly and trying to establish normal life as soon as possible afterwards. Today, the Russians also struck an intercity passenger train that was scheduled to run on the Kiev-Kharkiv route. Quote, "For now, we are not cancelling the trips. Passenger cars, including those newly received from the factory, will be put on this route," says the Ukrainian Railway Services. So, they're quick to respond. Okay, let's get this rolling stock cleared up. Let's get it scrapped. Let's get some new rolling stock on the lines. Let's fix the tracks up, and then bish bash bosh will be operating again later today. So the resilience of the Ukrainians is something to behold. Right now, let's move on to the Ukrainians' efforts last night. And they were very significant. And also, we don't know a lot of what they achieved still. Right. So, first of all, I did a YouTube short on this last night, talking about this video before we get onto details of what happened last night. Yesterday, a Russian working in the Typhoon military plant in Kaluga produced this video saying "Hokol," so really not pro-Ukrainian, like derogatory term for Ukrainians. "Please hit this effing Typhoon military plant in Kaluga. We haven't been paid salaries for 2 months." So that you've got a worker at a factory saying, "Please hit my factory. They haven't paid me for 2 months," shows that in the military-industrial complex, the heart of Russia's ability to commit to prosecute this war, they're not getting paid, right? So this has this is a very strong reflection of the economic woes in Russia at the moment, and also gives you an indication that it's annoying the workers who are otherwise pro-Russian. Obviously, these are Russian workers who are working in the industry to do as much damage to Ukraine as possible, saying, "Please blow up my industry because these bastards haven't paid me." Really, I think, emblematic video that. What else before we get into the details? With all of Russia's air defense units now allocated to protecting the palaces of Trump's boss. So this is kind of talking about the news that we now know that one of the palaces near, I think, Sochi, one of Putin's own palaces, is surrounded by like 14 air defense systems or something. And yet Ukraine is able to almost with impunity hit these really significant hydrocarbons infrastructure facilities. There's an asymmetry there. So with all of Russia's air defense units now allocated to protecting the palaces of Trump's boss, Ukraine has now the opportunity to completely destroy the core of Russia's economy. Ukrainian drones freely strike Russia's Kubyshev oil refinery over 17 times. So there are some claiming dozens of strikes on one single facility. Like, this is what I've been asking for ages, which is not just 2 strikes, not just 3, 4, 5 drones hitting a facility, but an absolute bucket load of drones hitting it. And that's what we're hearing happens. So just to give you a list of what's happened in August alone, the Novokubyshev refinery hit on August the 2nd, along with the Ryazan refinery. 5 days later, on the 7th, the Afipsky refinery hit. That's been hit again, by the way, Afipsky. In fact, a bunch of these have been multiply hit, so not just on the days that are mentioned here. Saratovsky refinery hit on the 10th, Volgograd refinery on the 14th, Syzran on the 15th. By the way, Syzran's been hit multiple times. Novoshakhtinsk hit on the 21st, and that's been hit subsequently again. And the Kubyshev refinery hit on the 28th, and I don't think that's for the first time either. So, actually, no, that might be because there's a Novokubyshev refinery that is right next door that has, I think, been hit. Anyway, what we heard last night is that drones were being sent all over the shop, and what we don't have information of is what 90% of these drones were up to. So the claim was last night that they were massively striking Kursk, Belgorod, Tula, Kaluga, Lipetsk, Saratov, Ryazan, Rostov and Krasnodar regions. And yet, really, we have only heard about 2 sites being hit. So what's happened to all the other drones? Don't know. Russian monitoring channels are fearing that Ukrainians are planning to launch Flamingo-type cruise missiles. with the 3,000 kilometer range. We haven't heard anything about that, but there was typical panic. But before that, we heard of massive strikes taking place towards and on Crimea, right? So you're looking at Melitopol, you're looking at Mariupol, you're looking at southern Kherson, but probably Crimea. Okay, so Kherson, Zaporizhia regions, Russian army positions, temporary deployment bases, field headquarters, and other high-value military equipment are being bombed, according to N-Strike. Now, I don't know if that's definitely true. We don't have any battle damage assessment. But according to preliminary reports, casualties are significant. Have no idea what happened there. We knew at the time that Crimea was being hugely significant, right? About 200 drones are striking occupied Crimea. Explosions reported in Sevastopol, Saki, Yevpatoria, Novofedorivka. Russian channels were reporting, and there are sounds. There's lots of audio evidence of this happening. A drone assault was underway across occupied Crimea, said no reports last night, stretching from Saki to Sevastopol and towards Bakhchia-Sarai, Simferopol and Petri. Air defences are engaging numerous targets, including at least 5 jet-powered drones. Explosions and intersection activity reported in multiple locations. Now, what we don't know is, what happened over Crimea. So explosions heard as Ukrainian drones target occupied Crimea, according to Kiev Independent. Swarm of drones attacked Crimea, targeting various regions on the peninsula. Several explosions were heard in the cities of Sevastopol, Yevpatoria around 11 p.m. And then, drones en route to the peninsula. No battle damage assessment. I am assuming with the amount of degradation of Russian air defenses and radar systems in Crimea that the Ukrainians have been waiting to do a massive attack on Crimea and take out loads of things at the same time. Was that last night? Don't know. Were the Ukrainians still stymied by the Russians, and were the Russians able to intercept most of the Ukrainian drones? I don't know. It could be that actually the Russians did a really good job of intercepting Ukrainian drones there, or they didn't, and there will be a lot of data to emerge. Let's hope that Ukraine has had success there. But actually, that's not the biggest news from last night. So the biggest news from last night was the Kupiashevsk refinery in Samara being struck by Luty drones, at least Luty drones. It's about 1,000 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. Annual production capacity output from the facility is 7 million tons of oil products. So you have the Kupiashevsk refinery, but also the Efipsky refinery hit for not the first time, significantly as well. That's down in the Krasnodar Oblast. The refinery of Efipsky is about 380 kilometers from the current front line. Annual production there is around 7 million tons. And in fact, Robert Brody has said that this has affected 4.7% just last night alone of Russia's output. So let's look first of all at, initially Special Kherson Cat said Novokubiashevsk oil refinery. It's not, it's actually Kubiashevsk oil refinery just next door. But so I don't know whether the 7.9 million tons per year is correct, but it's in the Samara region, and it was all on fire by the looks of it. Like, the multiple drone strikes hit not just one area of the refinery, as you can see there. Some saying that 17 explosions were heard at the refinery. According to eyewitnesses, at least dozens, so that would mean 24 at least, of drones hit the refinery. The entire territory is shrouded in smoke and fire after the attack. So really significant damage. Russian witnesses report at least 17 drone strikes on Kubiashevsk oil refinery. The moment of drone strikes on the refinery here, you can see some already having hit and exploded, and another drone just slamming into another part of the refinery. This is going to have caused massive, possibly terminal issue to that refinery. And more videos of intense fire at the territory of the refinery there. You go and look at these online. There are so many of them kicking about because this was a terrible night for Russian hydrocarbons. Some Russian air defense can be seen trying to repel a drone attack on the oil refinery, but it's already completely engulfed in flames. It's like trying to shut the barn door after the horses have bolted. But there you go. Important update is a Kubiashevsk, as they say later, refinery, not Novokubiashevsk. So you can see they're very close to each other. The one on the left is Novokubiashevsk, and the one on the right is Kubiashevsk. So Novo meaning new. Important update. It was that one, not the other. I was subjected to a massive drone strike. Both refineries are located literally across the street from each other, which is where the inaccuracy came from. Kuybyshev has the capacity of 7 million, so not 7.97 million tons a year. Lyuty kamikaze drones on the approach to Kuybyshev oil refinery. It breaks through Russian air defense. Now, let's have a look at this actually. So, we now know that the new FP1 drone looks almost identical to the Lyuty drone, but it doesn't have landing gear. The Lyuty drone takes off from a runway and has landing gear. I don't know if that has landing gear. Somebody else can tell me. If it's not got landing gear, that could be the new FP1 drones, which are saying they can make 100 a night, 100 a day. Then you'd expect them to be able to fire 100 a day, which you'd expect then to be there to be massive attacks on refineries like this using those drones. So I'm not 100% sure that is Lyuty. I'll let someone else with keener eyes than me check that out. And another point of view of the refinery here, just all on fire. Massive destruction right across the refinery's footprint there. Some more footage from the attack on the refinery. Just phenomenal damage, no doubt, having been done to that refinery. Wow, as someone says, one of the most successful attacks. The area burning is huge. So this is like massively significant. But here is a targeted strike at the war infrastructure. And I say war infrastructure because this is how Russia pays for the war, right? And also it's how they fuel their own war machine. So then we hear that a Fipsky refinery, so I think that might be the Kuybyshev there, but the initial pictures from this video, I think this one, that's a Fipsky, as far as I'm aware. So really significant fires going on there, which is in the Krasnodar Oblast. 6.25 million tons a year, supplies fuel to the army. Kuybyshev 7 million tons, produces 30 plus petroleum products. Explosions and large fires reported at both sites. Here we have a Fipsky, a gas and cast condensate co-processing unit was damaged on the territory of the Fipsky refinery, according to Cyber Boroshino. Unit has a capacity of 3.25 million tons a year. If it's stopped, a significant part of the raw material cannot be prepared for further processing. And then here we have the commander of Ukraine's unmanned systems forces, Robert Brobdy, Magyar, saying that strikes on Russia's oil refineries, Kuybyshev and Afipsky, in just two, as have caused, last night alone, caused a 4.7% cut to fuel output. And I presume that's been added to what Reuters was saying was 17% to make around 21%. Give or take their points here and there. Russia's fuel output has dropped by 21%, says Robert Brobdy. That is a fifth of their fuel output from the hydrocarbons industry. That is absolutely phenomenal, just in August alone, right? Wow, in just 2 weeks, wow, 21%. And look at the impact on that refinery there. This is hugely significant night for the Ukrainians. It wasn't just the refineries here. Additional railway stations hit overnight in Kryaz, in Samara, at Kryaz overhead. So that's going to be near where these refineries were. Overhead lines were damaged, delaying 10 trains and cancelling 3 at Petroval. I think Petroval is in Volgograd. A non-passenger facility was struck, causing a fire and delaying 4 trains. So there you go. That is Volgograd, as it says there. So other targets were hit as well. Now, bad news for the Ukrainians is that one of the major targets for Ukraine is, given that 500, almost 600 drones were sent at Ukraine last night, target number one is the Yelabuga drone manufacturing facility. But apparently there is now evidence that the Russians have built some really significant air defenses around there. Russia installs air defense towers around major drone factory after Ukraine consistently targets it, according to the ATESH partisan movement, with some videos showing these towers. The Kremlin can build new towers, but this won't save them from retribution, says ATESH, adding that for every Shahed drone launched in Ukraine, a just strike will come. The Yelabuga facility, located over 1,000 kilometers from Ukraine, produces Garan 2 drones extensively used in attacks against Ukrainian cities. So, yeah, I wonder whether the Ukrainians will try and hit those towers as well as the facility itself. And yeah, so Chris Owicki, talking about last night's strike, says internet shutdowns and blocks on Telegram continue to cripple. So we know that Telegram and WhatsApp have been shut down by the Russians as a kind of way of getting a hold of the information space. It's not good news for the Russians, who use them to help coordinate their air defenses. So internet shutdowns and blocks on Telegram continue to cripple the coordination of Russia's air defenses. Mobile fire teams are reported to be secretly using insecure Chinese radios instead, and despite the name, aren't allowed to be mobile. As previously reported, local officials frequently shut down mobile internet access during drone raids to prevent Ukrainian drones using them for navigation. The Russian government has also recently blocked calls on Telegram and WhatsApp. The Neribar Telegram channel complains, though, quote, any initiative can be ruined by a thoughtless approach to its implementation. I remember when the drone raids began, a multitude of warning methods proliferated, including even special applications. Now, someone's bright mind has decided to cut off communications in the event of a drone raid, but how are we supposed to alert and warn people? Apps and Telegram, God forgive me, work via mobile internet. By the way, communication between fire teams also breaks down because our communications are, shall we say, a bit weak, with unpatched Boafeng radios in sealed safes so that we don't have to report them if they are lost. The story with mobile fire teams is even more amusing. Mobile fire teams are often restricted to moving within the territory of the protected object. In theory, this may be convenient for reporting purposes, and it is easier to collect the casings for it, and no one scares civilians, but even the clumsiest retard has the ability to cause damage even when it is debris. When a drone falls in one place, formerly shot down on the target object. No, technically, of course, it was riddled with buckshot and other lead, but that doesn't prevent it from overcoming the final 100 meters. That's why the widely read Rebar channel concurs correctly locates the source of the problem in the Russian Ministry of Defense's long-running failure to provide a secure official alternative to Boafeng's radios and Telegram. Quote, here we could throw a fit of blame, I presume, says Reba, at the authors of the idea and its executors in the person of telecom operators for the fact that with such measures they interfere with the destruction of enemy drones. But first, I want to ask a question. How did it happen that in 2025 ordinary messengers and civilian applications are used as a means of control for the troops? The problems with the communications of the Russian armed forces were fully revealed at the very beginning of the special military operation. In total, almost 4 years have passed, but the overall situation with unprogrammed Boafengs in sealed safes has not changed dramatically. There may be questions for telecom operators and local authorities, but it is not their fault that mobile fire teams have no other means of communication and situational awareness other than those tied to the mobile internet. I would like to believe that the integrated information interaction system will be diligently implemented and a satellite group will begin to grow with devices. It is strange that when there are problems with communications in the army, for some reason they blame the phone operators, Megaphone and MTS, and not the relevant Ministry of Defense department. Wow, stinging rebuke there, but very important to understand that. Now, moving on to other bits and pieces. More details will come out today, though, I'm sure. I'll keep you up to date. Ukraine's new law on multiple citizenship will first be extended. So this is in line with allowing 18 to 22-year-olds men to be able to leave the country under certain conditions, I presume. But there's also this dual citizenship will be allowed for the first time. It's going to be extended to 3 European countries, Germany, Poland and Czech Republic, according to Zelensky. We hear that from the Euromaidan press from go west, Ukraine's west, from Carpathian peaks to Lviv's cobbled streets. Tourism is thriving. Tax revenues have jumped 35% this year. Proof that resilience isn't just survival, it's growth. So people are, and I've said this before, I'd much rather my money went to Ukraine in another country. So I don't mind going to Ukraine and it being accused of being war tourism, because I want to put my money into Ukraine so they can help to survive this war. And where it's safe and responsible to visit, I don't have a problem with visiting. Kyiv Independent reports that Russia's cut its economic growth forecast from 2.5% to 1.5%, as the finance minister told the Russian president the country has lowered its economic growth forecast as the country's wartime economy continues to falter. And indeed, Russia's maritime oil exports, says Visioner, have decreased mainly due to the drop in shipments at the Ust-Luga port, which is connected to the Druzhba pipeline, recently attacked 3 times. Last week, only 2 tankers were loaded instead of the usual 5. Additionally, the price of Urals oil is significantly lower. The figure is set in the Russian budget for 2025 at 5,281, but it's actually 4,400 at the moment. The shortfall is 17%, indicating pressure on the Kremlin revenues. So, everywhere there is economic trouble for the Russians. Now, on the other hand, as the US is actually reducing some sanctions, such as with diamonds. So the US has allowed the import of certain Russian origin diamonds despite the sanctions. A license published by the Office for Foreign Assets Control, OFAC, states that diamonds can be imported until September the 1st, 2026 under the following conditions, blah, blah, blah. So they are allowing diamonds and not sanctioning the diamond industry, as I think they should be. So while the American administration is looking to be light-handed on Russia, 62% of Americans, so that includes a large swathe of Republicans, back sanctions on Russia's trading partners, poll says. So this being secondary sanctions. Among supporters of US President Donald Trump's from the Republican Party, 76% backed sanctions against Russia's trading partners, while Democrats shared this position at 58%. So interesting, there's a switch there. So Republicans overwhelmingly support secondary sanctions on, say, India and China, whereas Democrats are like, even though they are still broadly supportive of it, are less supportive of it. Probably, I would have thought, wanting Russia to be sanctioned more than secondary sanctions. I would say it should be both and. But interesting. Zelensky, according to Christopher Miller of the Financial Times, has signed a decree formally making Olya Stefanishnya Ukraine's new ambassador to the US. So the Makarova, that's the MFA for the Russians. Anyway, the other, the woman, what was her name? Anyway, she's been replaced by Stefanishnya, obviously with a view of trying to cozy up to Trump, try and affect Trump and his administration better. They've changed the ambassador. The Trump administration approved her candidacy this week. She previously served as Ukraine's deputy prime minister for European integration and was key to the country securing EU candidacy. Zelensky says one of her key tasks will be cooperation with the US in the defense sector. Ambassador, it was Makarova. Oksana Makarova will continue to be part of the team, the president says. That's good. So that expertise remains. Now, Nord Stream, 7 Ukrainians have been supposedly were involved in the 2022 gas pipeline explosions, according to German outlet Die Zeit. The German investigation has stated that 7 people took part in the operation, 4 divers, an explosive specialist, a skipper, and a group coordinator. Later, Yevgeny Yu joined the group, probably delivering additional explosives. The saboteurs operated from the yacht Andromeda, a 15-meter sailboat, Bavaria Cruiser 50, on which DNA traces and fingerprints remained. Among the participants, diving instructor from Kiev, Volodymyr S., who was hiding in Poland and escaped. 53-year-old Ukrainian military man Vsevolod K., previously trained at the Bundeswehr Center for Weilflecken, died in eastern Ukraine in December 2024. His DNA matched materials from Andromeda. Sergei K., the group's coordinator, was recently detained in Italy. He was a guy that was arrested by the Italians. Valeria T., a 40-year-old professional diver with a Ukrainian record for diving depth at 104 meters, convinced the crew to complete the operation despite bad weather. And a skipper from Odessa with extensive maritime experience who was in charge of the Andromeda. His fingerprints were also found. So that's going to be interesting to see how the Germans deal with that and how the international community does as well. Now, 5 Western companies giving the most to Russia's war have been named. Newsweek says tax paid by them will pay for 1 million Russian soldiers. Raiffeisen Bank, the Austrian bank that is at the heart of negotiations, the Austrians trying to get it off the blacklist. Ukrainians fighting over that one. Chery Automobile, which is a Chinese but not just Chinese, I think automobile company, 222 million. Raiffeisen back $402 million. Philip Morris, so international, so tobacco company, 220 million. Japan Tobacco Company, 182 million. And Leroy Merlin, I don't know who they are, 128 million. So anyway, that's for your information. And just very quickly, there was a horrific shooting last night. Loads of people on both sides of political divide shouting about how this person is either far left and far right, how they're trans, how they're this, how they're that. The end result is, don't pigeonhole this person. He's mental and horrific and all over the shop politically. So elements of far right, elements of far left, goodness knows. But what I'm including here is that actually wrote loads of Russian stuff on the weapons and appears to have been ensconced in Russian media, followed Russian rappers and spoke Russian and wrote Russian, right? So what is going on there? So all sorts of different theories coming out about this guy. Just, be a little bit careful, but certainly a lot of Robin Westman, I think born Robert Westman, yeah, I think is that lots of Russian written there in a notebook. Just be careful. Why did the terrorist in Minneapolis write in Russian on his guns? The guy that just shot 20 people in the US loved the Russian world, deep in Russian propaganda, wearing a FSB patch. I mean, goodness. So wrote, these are the stuff in Russian. So someone's translated the Russian on the guns. Let's take a look. A lot of Russian words. He not only wrote them, but also spoke some Russian while filming, and also gave some references to Russian memes. I'm the Reaper. This is all in Russian. Hate, kill yourself, bitch. The Z sign for Russian war support against Ukraine. Vodka and electronic warfare. So I don't know what's going on there. Absolutely Russian war social media pages induced, says this person. First pick, Russian meme song. He also sang it while filming. Second pick, meme of Russian origin. Kill yourself, shoot yourself. I'm the nightmare, bitch, and other senseless words without meaning. Written. I'm the faggot, but the Russian. I think that he also wrote that in English with the double G, but the single in Russian that could be referencing the name of the anti-tank gun, FAGOT, single G. In Russian transliteration of the English word stupid, bitch, hate, and FSB. No doubt that he was inspired by bloody Russians. That is what Russian hate and genocide mentality influence is. These are the consequences. So people connecting him to Russia, but he certainly had a lot of affiliation with Russia. Just so I understand, the mass shooter was trans and a liberal, also a racist, hated Latinos, black people and Jews, and last but not least was also homophobic. Somebody's story isn't adding up. I mean, it's just really weird, with loads of weird stuff written all over the shop, including kill Donald Trump. So yeah, so somebody's saying here, not enough people are talking about how the video of the shooter urging people to vote for a Republican House candidate. I met Brandon Herrera. We agreed to a lot of things, so you all should vote for Herrera. F those kids. So he's all over the shop. I don't know, but having that Russian connection is definitely something that needs explaining, and it'd be interesting to see whether that comes out here. So Minnesota shooter Robin Westman had a VK account. So VK is a Russian social media account where he followed Russian rappers under the name Bob Vyostmin. Another reason to ban all Russian music on streaming services, says someone. So yeah, something needs to be explained there in terms of the Russian connection for this horrific shooter. Let me know what you think. Anyway, take care, and I'll speak to you soon. Toodle pips.